Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a castle's shadowed wardrobe, specifically the mothball-scented corner where history's fabric frays. Picture this. Your fingertips brush wool so weathered it feels like dragon skin. That's the vibe. And no, you probably won't survive this tale without yawning. Consider yourself warned. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time below. Let's see who's braving this story from a midnight bunker or a lunch break cubicle. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trace the frayed edge of the surcoat, its crimson dye faded to bruised violet. Firelight licks the hearthstone, throwing shadows that twist like retreating soldiers. That burnt honey smell of beeswax candles. Yeah, that's your new co-host tonight. Medieval tailors used to steep fabric in urine to set colors. True story. Bet your fast fashion spree doesn't sound so bad now. The surcoat sprawls across your work table, heavier than its threadbare fibers suggest. Your pinky snags a loose thread, coarse as a night's 5 o'clock shadow. Historians still argue whether these garments were padded with horsehair or just layered over chainmail. All you know, this one reeks of iron and myrrh, like a battlefield dumped into a spice merchant's trunk. One sleeve droops, its gold embroidery eaten by moths. You swear their tiny jaws left Morse code bites. Ever heard of cloth ghosts? Some claim tapestries absorb memories like paranormal post-its. Blink, and you might see the original wearer's face in the weave. Total bunk, obviously, but tell that to the chill crawling up your spine. A spark pops in the fireplace, your cue to flip the fabric. The back's worse. A slash runs diagonally, edges charred. Campfire legend says Joan of Arc's surcoat burned cleaner, her divine aura preserving the stitching. You're pretty sure divine intervention wouldn't fix this. The wool crumbles like ancient parchment. 17 stitches in your needle discovers a rusted iron ring sewn into the hem. Fun fact, knights sewed talismans into their garments, saints' bones, dried flowers, even love notes. This ring's too small for armor. A child's keepsake, a smuggled key. The fireplace belches smoke. Suddenly, the room feels crowded. Your shears glint, demanding you cut the ring free. But artifacts have opinions. You leave it be. Midnight wind howls through a cracked window. The surcoat ripples, swallowing the draft like a sigh. You lean closer. Was that a whisper in Flemish? Probably just the linen thread protesting. Here's a tip from textile nerds. Always knot with the moon at your back. Superstition, sure, but your hands steady themselves anyway. By the 3rd hour, the surcoat's collar reveals its secret, a name embroidered in hair-thin silver. Eustace, not exactly a ballad-worthy hero. Eustace of wherever forgotten by chronicles, immortalized by subpar needlework. You wonder if he preferred wine or ale, if he died scared. The fire dims answering with a shrug of ashes. Dawn's first light stains the wool, your candles a molten stub. Needle blisters bloom on your thumb, medieval accurate at least. You snap the thread with your teeth. The surcoat lies mended for now. Its new stitches glisten like scars. Somewhere, Eustace's ghost yawns. Or maybe that's just you. The fireplace coughs its last ember, 80 winters of silence, settling back into place. The beeswax warms between your fingers, its golden sheen catching firelight as you coat the linen thread. 17 practiced twists seal the fibers. No medieval mercenary ever waterproofed their gambeson this thoroughly. Historians still argue whether hired swords preferred crossbows for their ease or despised the weapons as unchivalrous. Doesn't matter now. Your needle pierces wool where ash smudges fade into rust-brown bloodstains. The surcoat's right flank bears its worst wounds. Flamelight glints off the iron thimble, your old sword calluses catching on its dimpled surface. 14th century tailors used sheep femurs as stitching guides, a fact you drop at parties when the mead flows too freely. The first stitch pulls taut a bridge between frayed edges. You hum a troubadour's tune, half remembered from childhood, melody, warped by time into something jagged. Ash grit still lodges in the fabric's weave, tiny black stars in a burgundy sky. 3 centuries back, a London haberdasher patented crimson fixative using crushed beetles and lead. You stick to madder root dye, less historically accurate, but your kidneys thank you. The needle dips and rises, each puncture precise as suturing flesh. Funny how mending cloth feels heavier than stitching wounds ever did. A stubborn bloodstain resists the lye soap, its edges blurred by what might have been sweat or tears. Ancient Mesopotamian barbers moonlighted as surgeons, their razors cutting hair and abscesses with equal cheer. You scrub harder, the stain pales to a sickly pink. Good enough. Linen thread snakes through the wool, cross-hatching the gash with reinforcements, 12 stitches per inch, the same count found in Henry VII's embroidered sleeves. Your elbow bumps the candle, tallow spilling over the table like frozen lightning, kneading beeswax into the spill. You salvage enough for 3 more threads. Waste not every guildmaster's first lesson. The fire pops, launching an ember that dies midair. You catch yourself tracking its arc like a battlefield flare. Old habits haunting the wrists that now choose needles over daggers. The repaired section lies flat ridges of thread, mimicking old scar tissue. Experts think Viking sails used fermented reindeer urine to stay supple, a tidbit that ruins most museum exhibits. You press a coal-heated smoothing stone over the mend, wool hissing as it accepts the new truth of itself. Steady hands, maybe, or just decades of avoiding the question carved into every scar. Was the blood you staunched worth the cloth you're saving? Night deepens. The hearth's crackle fades to whispers somewhere beyond your workshop. An owl chalks its territory with hoots. You wind fresh thread around the beeswax brick, its surface patterned with fingerprints older than the surcoat itself. Tomorrow, the sleeve's moth bites, and the mystery of those 12 iron rings. Tonight, the prick of the needle, the whisper of linen through wool, and the ghost of a night's breath fogging the battlefield air as you close his final wound. The iron rings jingle when you lift the surcoat's hem, 12 tarnished hoops sewn with threadbare loyalty. Medieval knights often stitched campaign markers into their gear, though none as heavy as these. Your thumbnail rasps against verdigris. That stubborn green crust, even vinegar, won't lift. Historians still argue whether such rings marked milestones or served as portable shrines to fallen comrades. You suspect this knight voted both. Sun slants through the workshop's leaded glass, dust motes waltzing over the uneven weft. Experts think Egyptian linen was woven under moonlight to please textile gods. A tidbit that makes you side-eye your own midnight stitching sessions. The fabric feels thicker here, layers of hasty repairs stiffening the wool like armor plaque. Your needle seeks the original thread's path, ghostly grooves guiding each puncture. One ring detaches with a sigh, its rust-eaten thread surrendering after 3 centuries. The underside reveals a scratched glyph, maybe a battalion sigil or a tavern tally. 7th century Persian mercenaries used belt notches to track kills. But that's a conversation for historians who enjoy dagger measurements. You brush the glyph, rough metal catching skin like a raspberry's prickle. 3 rings later, you're waist deep in a repair sandwich, original 14th century wool, a 1598 patch job, and your own madder-dyed linen. Renaissance tailors favored hidden messages in seams, poetry, pardons, accusations. You found 3 so far, all too salt-crusted to read. Lye soap waits in its bowl patient as a siege encampment. The loom's ghost shivers beneath your palms, misaligned warps creating tiny hills in the fabric. Press your ear close. Do threads creak like rigging ropes? 18th century sailors mended sails with stitches so tight they sang in high winds. You replicate the technique, each pull and twist stretching the surcoat's story tighter. A twisted weft resists correction, its fibers kinked from decades stored folded. You steam it over rosemary-infused water, an old trick from a Belgrade textiles curator. The wool relaxes, wrinkles smoothing like grudges soothed by wine. 5 emergency stitches later, the weave lies flat, if not quite honest. Threading a fresh needle, you pause. The hearth's dying light gilds the surcoat's chest panel. Faint impressions linger where armor once pressed, geometric ghosts of protection, long discarded. 16th century blacksmiths quilted arming jackets with lamb's wool for extra cushioning, to mixed reviews from concussed knights. You outline the ghostly hexagons with chalk, a dotted roadmap of vanished steel. 1 ring slips from your grasp, clattering across the table like a runaway coin. 10th century Byzantine bodyguards sewed coins into their hems, emergency bribes, or battle-ready shrapnel. You trap the ring under a thimble, its rebellion short-lived. Beeswax softens the new thread, your fingers shaping it into submissive gleam. The last rings whole gapes, frayed edges, protesting fresh intrusion. You stab through the center, no time for diplomacy. Raw linen bites into wool, a ceasefire brokered by sheer force. The ring clicks into place, silenced, but never truly still. Night arrives unannounced, a thief pilfering the workshop's warmth. You light a tallow candle, its smoke smudging the air. 12 rings glint in the new flame, each a pit stop on the night's marathon of survival. Some claim veterans buried their armor after wars, symbolic rebirths, or just good riddance. You trace the surcoat's hem, wondering if its owner ever felt unstitched. Moths flutter against the window, their shadows dappling the fabric. You wave them off, not tonight, scavengers. A half-mended slash near the collar gapes, tomorrow's problem. For now, the loom's whisper fades, the rings fall silent, and your needle rests blade down in the candle's wax, a tiny sword sheathed in amber. The green yarn glows iridescent in the lamplight, a shade medieval dyers called malachite's breath. You unravel a skein, its fibers still holding the vinegar tang of old dye vats. Historians still argue whether battlefield surgeons used wine or honey to clean arrow wounds, but everyone agrees both hurt like hell. This tear's different, a ragged exit wound, where an armor-piercing tip punched through wool and boyhood. You dab the frayed edges with alcohol. It's what passes for tender mercy here. The surcoat shivers under your touch, or maybe that's your own hand trembling. 17th century archers collected arrowheads like chess trophies, creepy little sentimentalists. This damage suggests a bodkin point, triangular and cruel, still buried in some forgotten grave. Stitching begins at sunrise, each puncture precise as a coroner's incision. The green thread bites through layered wool, your needle navigating scar, tissue older than steam engines. Curators will tut about anachronistic dyes, but malachite fades nicely into patina ghosts. Let them gripe. You've seen Renaissance restorations done with berry juice and spite. The tear yawns 3 inches of unraveled destiny. You bridge the gap with a herringbone lattice, rebuilding the shoulder's slope from memory. 13th century squires wore their lords' colors weeks before battles, a privilege that apparently came with free target practice. Your thumbnail traces the injury's path, left clavicle to scapula, a biology lesson in wool. Ply separates mid-stitch, the yarn fraying like a nervous confession. You twist it tighter, sacrificing flexibility for strength. Ottoman silk bandages sometimes held arrow victims together, luxury, first aid for rich idiots who brought silk to a sword fight. This gets plain linen thread waxed with what else desperation. 2 hours in the mend resembles a crop row stitched by drunk farmers. You curse, rip out 6 inches, start over. Field medicine manuals suggested stuffing wounds with moss and prayer, though nobody recorded the prayers exact wording. Your version involves fewer saints and more creative verbs. Noon light exposes prior repairs, 8 generations of bad decisions. Someone used fishing line here in the 1920s. Practical, but sacrilegious. You unpick the nylon strand, its plastic sheen clashing with the wool's humility. Victorian menders preferred scarlet thread for battle scars, drama queens, with embroidery hoops. Malachite dyed linen starts bleeding color, turning your fingers into swamp witch accessories. Tudor weavers swore full moon dyeing fixed hues. Maybe they were just night owls with bad lighting. You blot the excess, lace trim soaking up green like moss on a tombstone. The squire's age gnaws at you 15, 20. Teen soldiers litter history like unclaimed buttons. Digging through textile layers reveals no bloodstain, just the wound's ghost in mangled threads. Portable altars from the Crusades held saintly finger bones. But this boy's shrine is all tension and apology. 3 pins hold the mend in place, their silver heads glinting like miniature shields. You suture the edges, over a spiral, ascending the shoulder's curve. Modern suturing techniques descend from sailmakers, stitches, the circular logic of holes needing closures. The yarn pulls taut, resurrecting the collar's military crispness. Someone knocks over the beeswax. It rolls under the table, still whispering usefulness. You let it escape. There's always more where that came from. Church records show squires received burial funds if their lords felt guilty enough. Ledger entries as warm as January grave dirt. Evening complicates the color, malachite deepening into something like sorrow. You add 3 stabilizing stitches, crossbars strong enough to bear forgotten names. Carthusian monks crafted wound coverings from pressed lilacs, fragrant bandages for the devout. This gets pragmatism and a whispered sorry to nobody in particular. The last knot buries itself, a tiny green tumor under the collar. You press the mend, wool sighing under the warmth. Toland man's wool cap survived 2 millennia in a bog. Why can't this surcoat outlast a few more centuries? The answer involves moths, mold, and humanity's endless gift for ruining things. Candle wax puddles around your scissors, amber trapping the day's dust. 12 stitches per inch the standard for military surcoats and sailcloth. No quorum decided that, just generations of calloused fingers, agreeing through shared exhaustion. You blow out the flame, the scent of burnt wick, replacing questions about boys who died for red wool. Dawn will come, that persistent guest. But for now, green threads hum in the dark. They don't spell the squire's name, just the shape of his absence. Your needle rests belly up in the wax, another soldier gone AWOL until sunrise. Velvet night seeps through the shutters, molten silver puddling around your work table. The surcoat's lower hem droops like a beggar's cuff, threads unraveling where the night habitually kicked his mount. You work by the lullaby of crickets, the moon a bone button pinned to midnight's cloak. 13th century castle accounts show candle allowances for night mending, lard and wick budgets rivaling their wine expenses. Your darning egg fits the tears curve ivory worn smooth by a century of worried palms. The needle glints, moon-cold steel piercing wool with surgical indifference. Tudor servants darned noble stockings by firelight, earning extra ale for every unseen stitch. Yours will never be so anonymous. History's flashlight always finds the mender's fingerprints. Linen thread resists the waxed groove, you spit on it. Medieval saliva contained enough amylase to weaken fibers, a fact that would horrify textile conservators. The taste of beeswax and rebellion floods your tongue, a cocktail for chronic insomniacs. Downstairs, the grandfather clock wheezes, its pendulum swinging like a metronome for ghosts. 3 dropped stitches mock you from yesterday's work, crooked headstones in a yarn cemetery. Unpick them, finger bones protesting. Moonlight bleaches the wool's crimson to ashy pink, the color of drained battlefields. Historians still argue whether night menders worked from piety or poverty. The answer's written in the thread count. Cobwebs shimmer in the rafters, reminding you of the lunatic who claimed spider silk strengthened seams. You hum a troubadour's melody, toneless and graveled by exhaustion. Dutch darning looms appeared in midnight inventories, alongside exorcism manuals tools for repairing body and soul. The needle slips, pricking your thumb. A bead of blood swells, black in the blue light. Field surgeons used lunar phases to time wound closures. Another reason to distrust astrology. Your stitches march tighter now, the rhythm syncing with watchful owl cries. Someone in the 1920s patched this section with typewriter ribbon progress's arrogant scrawl across medieval wool. You pluck the synthetic intruder, its red too garish for the moth hour. Wool breathes differently at night, fibers expanding like lungs in damp air. The darning egg warms against your palm, ivory hoarding centuries of borrowed heat. Your scissors lie abandoned, their blades married to a half-moon reflection. Egyptian weavers worked barefoot to feel loom vibrations, a quirk that killed arch support but birthed legends. The mend spans 4 inches now, woven so tight it repels shadows. An ache roots in your spine, that familiar guest from marathon stitching sessions. 16th century guilds find members for working past curfew, though the best menders always kept needles under their pillows. You stretch, elbow joints cracking like kindling. Moonlight frays at the edges as clouds muscle in the room, dimming to a coal mine's belly. Your needle falters, tactile memory guiding each thrust through the dark. Fragment of a woolen sock survived the Mary Rose shipwreck, saltwater preserving an apprentice's clumsy overstitch. This'll fare better, maybe. Dawn's first yawn silvers the horizon, roosterless and smug. The hem hangs finished, a fortress of thread against future unravelings. Paulownia wood darning eggs fetch insane prices at auction, collectors too scared to use them. Yours rolls off the table, chasing its shadow toward the dust bunnies. Last night's coffee congeals in its cup, a relic for future archaeologists studying caffeine cults. You press the mend to your cheek, wool scratching like stubble. Medieval launderers used stale urine to set dyes, fashion's eternal dance with desperation. The surcoat sags on its mannequin, anatomically incorrect, but spiritually intact. 3 threads protrude rebel hairs on a bureaucrat's neck. Clip them, the snip echoing through silent rafters. Moonlit darning rhymes survive in nursery songs, innocent chants about flax and fidelity. Your knees creak as you stand, blood rushing back to forgotten toes. The hearth exhales last night's ashes, cold and contrite. You unshutter the eastern window. Let dawn fact-check your work. 19th century restorers hated night, repairs, too much poetry in the process. The surcoat's hem holds for now. Moths circle like vultures who read the wrong memo. The collar gapes beneath your thumb, its velvet lining chewed by silverfish and time. 3 threads glint in the post-dawn haze, tarnished mercury veins threading through moth-bitten wool. Tudor bastards often gifted tokens to loyal knights. Henry Fitzroy once pawned a ruby to fund border raids. These strands feel heavier, warped gratitude from a prince who famously hated embroidery. You lean closer, oxidized metal pricking your nostrils with the tang of rained-on pennies. Renaissance tailors spun silver thread by wrapping foil around catgut, an allergy nightmare wrapped in glamour. The prince's initials hide beneath the oxidation, EK entwined like drunken serpents. Historians still argue whether the E stood for Edmund or Edward. Royal bastards loved their existential ambiguities. Your tweezers hover a stork's beak over wedding rings in a well. Removing the threads might collapse the collar's delicate drape. Leaving them invites tarnish to spread, slow acid consuming the surrounding weave. A 1543 inventory mentions 3 silvered wires in Sir Gareth's surcoat, no explanation given. The conservator in you screams, the storyteller stuffs, cotton in its mouth. Morning light exposes crude stitching around the token kitchen witch, repairs done mid-campaign. Field menders used whatever they scavenged, a defeated knight's cloak, a concubine's hair ribbon. These threads feel different, too fine for battlefield grafts. Maybe a royal tent had silk baskets and a bored mistress with nimble fingers. You blow dust off the collar, particles swirling like irritated fairies. Specks cling to the tarnished centuries of castle grime and fireplace phlegm. Conservation blogs swear by vodka sprays for metal threads. Too bad you're fresh out. The surcoat shifts under your hands, a restless sleeper stirring from bad dreams. 3 choices. Pry the threads loose, stabilize them, or let decay continue its lecture on impermanence. Tudor law required bastard-born children to use heraldic symbols with a diagonal bar, shame, stitched into their very banners. These threads curve defiantly, no humble strike-throughs here. Your scissors whisper, stay your hand from happier consequences. A rhyme surfaces, unbidden from some moldering etiquette manual. Bastard's gift, prince's thrift / twist the threads, sever the rift. Folk nonsense, probably. Yet your fingers retreat burned by the phantom heat of a prince's grudge. Downstairs, pipes clang, the manor's arthritic circulatory system protesting dawn. You cradle the surcoat's neckline, a midwife deciding which twin gets sacrificed. That's when you spot it. A fourth thread, hair thin and blackened. Carbon dating might prove it's horsehair from the prince's own charger, or just soot from centuries near fireplaces. Medieval metallurgists added arsenic to prevent tarnish, a practice that killed more apprentices than the plague. These threads dyed naturally, no poison required. You map the corrosion continents of neglect on a silver atlas. Every museum has pieces like this, artifacts half-eaten by their own memories. The tweezers tremble, an undecided pendulum, restoration's arrogance versus preservation's cowardice. Your breath stills, a ridiculous reaction, given the surcoat hasn't inhaled in centuries. A fly lands on the collar, green and smug as a court jeweler. You flick it away, commitment via laziness. Let tomorrow's menders curse or praise your inertia. Linen strips cut for stabilization fray at the edges. Your knife needs sharpening, or perhaps medieval linen resists modern blades out of spite. Archival glue smells like despair and sucrose. You spread it beneath the threads with a porcupine quill. A 1920s restorers note flakes from the collar's underside. Leave the damn thing be. J.P. Sunlight gilds the surcoat's shoulders, transforming moth holes into constellations. The prince's token sinks deeper into shadow, its silver gone the color of grudges. You sip cold tea, the bitterness, a familiar comfort. Some secrets aren't yours to extract. Rust creeps while you deliberate, biology's answer to rhetorical questions. The manor's cat slinks in, fur dusted with attic snow. It sneezes on the surcoat, a disapproval rating written in phlegm. You document the threads with charcoal rubbings, warding off future regrets. By noon, the decision cements itself in action's quiet victory. 3 silver threads remain forged by a bastard, ignored by history, spared by your sudden allergy to legacy. Let the next caretaker judge. Your shears close not on metal, but on the daylight itself, as shutters block the sun's interrogations. The chest plate's ghost lingers, a pressed shadow staining the wool where armor once bit into hope. You rub the spot, fingertips catching on fibers matted with centuries of sweat blood mud alchemy. Crusader knights often sewed saints' relics into their gambesons. Turns out faith leaves rust marks too. Dawn filters through needle pricks in the shutters, light dissecting the surcoat into battle maps. The shadow stretches from third rib to solar plexus, a phantom blade's perfect kill zone. Ottoman textile archives mention using fermented pomegranate rinds to lift bloodstains. Your linen strip soaks in vinegar instead. Progress smells like pickled defeat. Scrubbing reveals the truth. This isn't blood. The stain's edges fluoresce, faintly green under your magnifier. Verdigris, copper oxide, leached from the armor's rivets during 10,000 weary marches. Historians still argue whether medieval soldiers polished their chest plates for duty or as penance. The wool remembers better shine days. Your embroidery hoop creaks, and owls yawn in reverse. Vines seem too gentle for this battlefield canvas, until you recall henbane twists strangling castle walls. 3 shades of green thread mock your kit: parsley, moss, rot. You mix them like a poisoner at market. The first stitch pierces, a surgeon's careful incision. 13th century embroiderers believed patterns could trap evil spirits. Cross-stitch as demon jail cell. Your vine inches across the shadow, a chlorophyll embolism. The surcoat stiffens, or maybe your fingers do. Mid-morning sun exposes prior cover-ups, 6 generations of menders hiding this stain beneath florals, geomancies, even a crude lion rampant. The lion's wool came from Cornwall, DNA tested in 2003 by an over-caffeinated grad student. His thesis sits unread in a Cardiff library. Dust might cheer his dedication. You pause, magnetized needle pointing north. Was the original stain honored? Hidden? Enhanced? Modern curators would x-ray it, peel history like an onion. Your thimble taps the surcoat. Let's keep some mysteries itchy. The vine branches, kudzu ambition. Every leaf requires 17 stitches. Byzantine nun's method for meditative embroidery. You lose count at 93, distracted by the chest plate's acidity, still nibbling the fabric. Chemical warfare, wool addition. A moth carcass crumbles under your elbow times casualty report. Your chenille needle snags on the shadow's edge, resistance like biting into gristle. Chroniclers wrote that King John's surcoat once sparked riots for being too mournfully embroidered. Governance through sewing forgotten statecraft. Lunch arrives, cheese sandwich, and regret. The vine now spans 8 inches. Jurassic Park, foliage swallowing a T-Rex skeleton. Tomato juice drips on the surcoat, adding to the stain's resume. You dab with seltzer, carbonation, hissing like a disapproving squire. Needlework manuals, worn against forcing thread direction. The fabric's weave knows its true north. You rebel, crossing threads into braids that mimic chainmail. Irony as armor, 5 centuries late. Tea-stained lace samples hang nearby, failed experiments in camouflage. An ant crawls up the vine tourist in your tapestry. You flick it toward the surcoat's hem interloper, sentenced to the siege of Calais diorama. Dusk arrives with a gift. Your lamp illuminates chlorophyll and verdigris at war. The original stain pulses beneath new stitching, haunted TV static, Tudor sumptuary, laws forbade gold embroidery. On wool your rogue threads mock dead legislation. Blunt scissors trim excess floss. The vine's tendrils sway under your breath. No amount of green can erase metal's memory. But oh, the shadows make the leaves look fiercer. Cook's radio bleeds through the floorboards, weatherman predicting storms. Let the rain come. This surcoat's survived better drownings. You snap the last thread, a carnivore severing umbilical cords. The chest plate's spectre remains now, holding hands with something that grows. Candle wax tributaries harden across the worktable. Your spine crackles like kindling as moths breach the lamplight's siege. Their powdery wings graze the surcoat, pilots circling a woolen runway. Venetian tailors once soaked fabrics in cedar oil to repel moths. Your workshop smells of dust and dumb hope. One lands on the chest plate's fine embroidery, green threads, becoming a landing strip for time's miniaturized bombers. You flick the intruder away. It spirals into shadow, only to rematerialize beside a moth-chewed elbow patch. 17th century plague doctors believed moths carried souls of the dead. Tonight's squadron feels more like looters casing a tomb. The surcoat's newest mend glistens, beeswaxed linen, pulled taut as a drumhead. Historians still argue whether ceremonial moth holes in royal tapestries were accidents or symbolic portals for deities. Your thimble glints, a tiny knight charging at wings. Midnight hums in your ears, or is that the moths harmonizing? Their bodies blot out constellations in the lamp's glass chimney, a negative image of the star-strewn surcoat lining. You uncork a vial of lavender, medieval Europe's favorite moth deterrent, and sprinkle droplets like holy water. The scent mingles with aged sweat trapped in the wool eau de crusades. 3 moths kamikaze into the vinegar jar, their tiny legs kicking in brine. Sacrifices to the preservation gods, you mutter, rescuing a 4th with your tweezers. Victorian naturalists wrote that certain moths mimic owl eyes on their wings. Your survivors show no such artistry. Just hungry gray specks auditioning for a tragedy. The surcoat's hem stiffens under your palm, starch and horse glue fighting a losing war. You stitch reinforcements near a moth-ravaged vent, each puncture mimicking the original weaver's tension. Someone sewed goat hair into this seam circa 1412, a scratchy medieval cheat code for durability. Your polyester blend feels like heresy, but holds tighter. One particularly bold moth alights on your wrist, antennae tasting salt from 7 hours of labor. Renaissance portraitists painted moths in still lifes as memento mori. Tonight's cameo leans more memento snack. You blow gently, the moth cartwheels onto the surcoat's collar, wings brushing tarnished thread that once shone like nightly vows. Dawn loiters at the windows, a shy spectator. Your needle drags as fatigue turns muscles to wet yarn. The surcoat's left flank now bears a moth-shaped void where fabric surrendered to hunger. You slip a patch beneath the whole snippets from a 1920s morning dress dyed with blackberries. Let future scholars debate the symbolism of Edwardian grief, mending chivalric decay. A moth's antenna pokes from the vinegar trap, final plea before dissolution. You bury the jar in a cabinet, next to rusted shears and a desiccated honeycomb. The remaining moths stage a coup, swarming the lamp, until the bulb becomes a pollen-coated sun. Their shadows quilt the surcoat, a lace of living absence. You peel your cheek from the worktable skin imprinted with wool's geometric kiss. The surcoat lies transformed, not restored, but colonized. Moth wounds linger beside your mends, an armistice between preservation and entropy. Some cultures believed clothing absorbed its wearer's soul if true. Tonight's visitors feast on ambrosia of valor and hubris. Last candle guttering, its flame licks the edge of a moth silhouette. You blow out the light, exhaling as wings brush your lips. The vinegar jar's tang still claws your throat as sunlight slants through mold-speckled shutters. Your needle pauses above the surcoat's left breast. A repaired tear stares back, puckered like a poorly healed wound. 3 threads glint alien gold amidst the crimson weave Persian silk, smuggled through Venetian trade routes. If your guild training holds, historians love debating whether 14th century dyers added crushed beetles to red fabrics, as if bugs solve every medieval mystery. This interlacing whispers louder crimes. You peel back the men's edge, brittle adhesive cracks like old knuckles. Beneath lies coarser yarn, its helical twist counterclockwise instead of the guild's strict rightward spin. Bavarian wool, Hungarian. The baron's men rode with Hungarian mercenaries during the peasant revolt of 28, or was it Swiss? Your cambric patch hovers, judge and executioner. A draft riffles through threadbare tapestries on the wall. Nightly figures ripple, as if stirring. One moth-eaten banner depicts the baron receiving his spurs funny, how they never show him trading saltpeter to both sides. You snort, threading your needle with local flax. Let the replacement yarn scream provincial honesty. Some claim double-twist wool came from Andalusian war looms, but certified textile nerds know Hungary cornered that market after the Golden Bull of 1222. The debate's drier than your glue pot. Sunlight glares on the mismatched threads. Their metallic sheen winks like a conspirator. Your scissors hover. Medieval law required foreign fabrics to bear weaver's marks, but this, just bastard strands hiding in a hero's uniform. You imagine the baron's tailor sweating as he stitched these, window shutters bolted, lanterns smothered. Maybe he hummed a folk tune to steady his hands. Historians still argue whether the Ballad of Two Falcons was coded anti-monarchy propaganda tonight. It's just a bad earworm. The surcoat's lining rasps again, time's own gossip. You flip the fabric, revealing a constellation of wax seals beneath the armpit. 2 show the baron's crest. The third bears a winged serpent eating its tail. Your thumb brushes the emblem, same as the hidden sigil near the waist. Coincidence piles up like unwashed plates. A warped floorboard creaks. You startle, needle jabbing your thumb. blood beads, swallowed by wool older than your grandfather's grandfather. There's your proof, you mutter to the empty room. Crusaders supposedly paid linen weavers in blisters, and blessings, lucky, you upgraded to cash. The blood spreads, a Rorschach test, daring you to see treason. Outside, church bells bicker about the hour. You press a linen scrap to your thumb. Medieval manuscripts claimed menstrual blood, strengthened embroidery thread, a fact you'll never unlearn. The surcoat's foreign threads gleam, unrepentant. Your needle pierces fabric with more force than necessary, each stab burying secrets deeper. Let future x-rays puzzle over the layered lies. By noon, the mend sits flawless, provincial wool over treason silk, bridged by your own blood-darkened flax. Sunlight washes the surcoat in false innocence. You drizzle beeswax across the seam, watching it seep into crevices like liquid censorship. Somewhere, a historian's future thesis just burst into flames. The repaired section feels heavier, or maybe that's the ghost of your ethics sinking. You fold the surcoat, pressing the treasonous patch against layers of cleaner mends. 3 centuries from now, will they carbon date the stitches and gasp, or dismiss it as another overworked restorer's midnight blunder? The ledger by your elbow stays empty. Certain stories refuse ink. Feet shuffle in the corridor outside. Mrs. Pelletier, with her noon tea and unsubtle curiosity. You drape a dust cloth over the surcoat, hiding last night's vinegar patrol and this morning's crimes. The winged serpent sigil itches beneath the fabric, or maybe that's just wool follicles seeking revenge. Mrs. Pelletier's tea tray clatters onto your work table, chamomile steam fogging the spectacles she pretends not to need. Her gaze lingers on the dust-cloaked surcoat. Restorers, guild rules say no liquids near relics. You deadpan, rotating the thistle brooch between thumb and forefinger. The silver prong bites, same spot where the knight's gorget chafed his collarbone raw. Historians agree medieval armor could blister skin through padded gambesons. They're less chatty about noblemen gifting scratchy jewelry. You lift the brooch to daylight. Twisted wire holds a desiccated thistlehead. Rural lords swore the plant warded off evil spirits, though your instructor at the Lyon Textile Conservatory countered that it just attracted bees. The memory blurs. Did Sir Hughes really laugh when pinning this to your apron? Or has time photoshopped the moment? His campaign journal mentioned gifting 12 such brooches, but surviving examples display crude iron, not silver. Tea steam softens the brooch's ancient grime. 8 petals remain, each barbed wire sharp. Your needle tests the surcoat's collar clasp, tarnished iron teeth that drew blood long before museums existed. The original punctures uneven allergic reaction or hesitant stabbing. A 1523 tapestry in Bruges shows knights using cloak pins as improvised weapons. Your guild pension better cover tetanus shots. Mrs. Pelletier retreats, taking half your good light with her. You twist the brooch's pin, still serviceable after 6 centuries. Viking raiders supposedly wore thistles to honor Thor. Or was that a marketing gimmick for 19th century Scottish souvenir shops? The debate's thornier than the brooch itself. Pressure builds behind your eyes, too many hours squinting at betrayals woven in wool. You press the brooch to the surcoat's collar, seam cold silver against frayed crimson. Queen Matilda's tax rolls list thistle cultivation penalties in 1321. Turns out invasive plants trump heraldic sentiment. Jaw clenched, you drive the pin through moth-nibbled wool. Metal scrapes metal, clasp teeth, protesting their replacement. 57 stitches anchor the brooch in place, his dream of protection, fossilized in pricked fingers and plant corpses. Some claim Egyptian embalmers used thistle sap to seal mummy bandages tonight. It's just sweat making your linen thread sticky. Wind shudders the shutters, a storm dragging its knuckles across the castle ruins. The brooch sits askew, mocking your supposed craftsmanship. Regrets are tomorrow's problem, you mutter, fumbling for the beeswax. Reconstruction ethics manuals never mention how often conservators want to eat artifacts into moats. 3 parchment scraps flutter from the surcoat's folds. Inventory notes from its 1897 museum debut. Curator Arnaud's spidery script decrees all non-original elements must be catalogued in violet ink. You wink at the brooch. Welcome to the club, faker. Midnight oil stains the ledger page as you transcribe lies. Violet ink, per regulations. Historians still argue whether Viking arm rings were currency or cocky flexes tonight. It's just a hashtag for your insomnia. The brooch's shadow stretches across the entry, a bouncer at memory's nightclub. Dawn finds you slumped over the work table, cheek imprinting the surcoat's geometric embroidery. Mrs. Pelletier's return trip jars you awake. Her gasp slices through the haze. You used non-reversible adhesive on a Category A relic. The brooch glints, smug in its permanence. You sip stone-cold tea. Call it interpretive conservation. Outside, thistles sway where the tour buses park, invasive, enduring, thrumming with worker bee curses. Heat radiates from the surcoat's armpits like sun-baked asphalt. Your nose wrinkles at the ammoniac punch. Historians agree medieval sweat was considered a vital humor, which explains why laundry manuals favored rosemary over soap. You crush dried leaves between palms. Their pine-sharp sting battles centuries of noble BO. Mrs. Pelletier peers over your shoulder. The 1897 catalog mentions lavender sachets, and the Black Death mentions leeches cured fever. You sprinkle marjoram instead, its gold-green dust motes catching in afternoon light. 17 strands of horsehair cling to the wool's innards, equine DNA trapped in the night's chafing hellscape. 3 rosemary sprigs go rogue, tumbling into the collar's shadow, where rusted mail scraped the worst stink into the fibers. Ever notice how armor smells like a gym bag lined with pennies. The guild's odor logbook suggests cedar chips, but Agrippa's De Re Rustica swore by vinegar-soaked moss. Let future scholars debate your herbal mutiny. You seal the sachet with beeswax, the surcoat, now resembling a taxidermied spice rack. 72 hours of fermentation looms. Some claim Roman gladiators rubbed themselves with time for luck. Tonight, you'll settle for not gagging. Dawn cracks on day 2. The surcoat exhales a scent halfway between herb-crusted lamb and locker room floor. Progress. You lie to the moth-eaten left sleeve. Your textbook claims English queens wore rosemary wreaths. For memory ironic how history forgets which monarch started the trend. By midnight, the marjoram surrenders, its sweetness devoured by the wool's sour musk. You rebel with juniper berries, tiny time capsules of alpine air. One rolls under the table, pursued by Mrs. Pelletier's tabby cat. Historians still argue whether medieval laundresses sang while working this feline duet of claws on stone. Argues yes. Hour 63 brings a revelation. The stench softens into something like smoked tea leaves. Your needle probes a sweat-stiffened seam, resistance, crumbling like ancient parchment. They never teach you this in conservation school, how unfinished mending smells like impatience. The final hour ticks by. Herb grit clings to your cuticles. You inhale deeply, rancid undertones now edged with pine resin resolve. Maybe that's how battle focus works, stench and salvation sharing the same armpit. Mrs. Pelletier stamps lone forms at the door, her perfume clashing with your botanical alchemy. The guild will demand an odor report. Tell them it's ode to perseverance. You flick juniper dust at her ledger, the tiny plume mimicking artillery smoke. Moonlight silvers the surcoat's shoulders, herb patches glowing like alien lichen. Some claim Napoleon's coat still sweats gunpowder in a Paris vault tonight. Your battlefield just smells like rosemary playing tug-of-war with regret. Wind carries a thistle seed through the window. It lodges in the surcoat's newly pliant wool. You let it stay, improvised air freshener or future restoration headache. The answer will bloom in another century. Rainwater weeps from the thistle seed's new home, plinking into the surcoat's right sleeve like a faulty metronome. Coastal sieges leave worse than rust. Saltwater's bastard cousin brood in wool. Your knuckle grazes the fabric, still damp after 3 centuries. Or is that your imagination? Mrs. Pelletier barges in with ledgers. Ship manifests show King Louis IX imported lichen for dye. October 1248, the same Louis who banned chess as morally corrupt. You flash a pawn lifted from her desk. Her sniff says everything. Siege of Damietta's ammoniac fog clings to memory. Crusaders boiled leather in urine to soften it. But this sleeve reeks darker, iron tang, with notes of longship rot. Historians agree storm lichen dyes were used on Viking sails, but matching 13th century French grey. Your mortar grinds rock tripe into powder, the lichen's rubbery flesh, resisting like overcooked octopus. Warm rainwater swirls in a pewter bowl. You dunk the mush like medieval tie-dye. Ever notice how historical dye recipes read like witch trials? Eye of newt replaced by lichens, storm-squeezed essence. The surcoat drinks the slurry, threads bloating into muddy veins. 12 stirs clockwise, 12 counter, superstition, masquerading as technique. Nightfall brings a crisis. The sleeve's elbow patch repels dye like nobles avoiding taxes. You resort to bribery. A honey wash bribes the wool's pores open. Someone once claimed Charlemagne's cloak drank honey wine like parchment. Tonight, you believe it. Dawn reveals a splotchy success. Cloud patterns bloom where salt etched its maps. Medieval laundresses might have used stale beer for setting colors. But your coffee-stained mug will have to do. Catastrophe strikes at noon. Mrs. Pelletier mistakes your dye pot for ink. Her quill dips. The lichen bath now holds a declaration of blotches. It's a restoration felony, she mutters, fleeing crabapple red. You salvage the mess, darning needle loaded with twice-dyed thread. Stitch by stitch, the siege's rage reappears, cross-hatched men's mimicking chainmail's grim lattice. Moonlight transforms the sleeve, lichen-gray whispers of North Sea squalls. A preserved sardine tin serves as your water source, contemporary cheat code for historically adjacent humidity. Historians still argue whether rain-stained armor demoralized troops or just made them soggy philosophers. Your thimble clinks against the sardine tin, a makeshift Vespers bell for the sleepless. The final stitch bites you're not buried where the knight's wrist would have flexed. Storm lichen meets 14th century sweat, a bouquet only mildew could love. Mrs. Pelletier reappears with apology pastries. The guild allows 21st century humectants for too late. You flick a lichen fleck onto her raspberry tart, an edible truce. Midnight wind tests your work. The sleeve sways like a ship's damp pennant. Some claim Nelson's coat at Trafalgar smelled of seaweed and gunpowder. Yours now carries Quebec blizzards and a librarian's regret. One surviving thread of original dye clings near the cuff, indigo turned gangrene green. You let it linger, ghost of the dyer who outstubborned the Mediterranean sun. Dawn leaks through storm clouds. The surcoat's right arm hangs heavier, wiser. Rain taps the window, approving patter or reminder to fix the gutter. Either way, the squall sleeps now, dreaming in lichen and honey-sweet scars. Firelight licks the surcoat's waistline. Your darning needle freezes mid-stitch. There, between 7th century repairs and moth-bloomed holes, a serpent devours its own tail. Gold thread gone green whispers heresy in the flames. Every medievalist knows the Ouroboros symbol, philosophers' stone diagrams, not knightly garb. Yet here it loops, fangs buried in scale-riddled flesh. Your thimble taps the embroidery, testing for 20th century pranks. No stitch angles prove its period-accurate bastard couching. Mrs. Pelletier materializes with spiced wine. Her shadow drapes the serpent like a shroud. alchemical symbols on Crusader relics. That's how you get haunted diplomas. The fire pops ember glow, etching the snake's coils deeper into wool. You recall the Ripley scroll, 15th century alchemy text, with this exact beast. But knights didn't doodle secret societies in their laundry. Check the privy records. You murmur, half to yourself, any whispers about serpentine affiliations. She snorts. Lord Jeffreys' tax ledger mentions 12 L's gold wire for altar cloths, robe maintenance, highly pious moth attack, needlepoint paranoia sets in. Was this stitched during the Knights Templar purges? Or just some lordling's inside joke? Your scissors hover, snip the evidence, or preserve the anomaly. Heraldry nerds claim certain salamander emblems hid fire-resistant fabric treatments. Turns out real salamanders just hate embroidery. But this tastes like intentional blasphemy. The serpent's eye glints, judging your life choices. Historians still argue whether coded symbols ever stitched treason into tunics, or if we're just projecting spy dramas onto bored nobles. Your needle's eye winks, keeper of secrets. You compromise, overstitch the beast with charcoal gray wool. Plausible deniability, now wrapped in tasteful camouflage. 3 passes, the Ouroboros becomes a mangled vine. Medieval cover-ups probably involved less swearing and more stabby consequences. Mrs. Pelletier examines your deception. It's missing something. She plucks a hair from her bun, silver filament gleaming. Stitch this across its mouth, symbolic gag order. The fire sighs as you obey, twisting her strand into the serpent's maw. Quirky fact: some castle stewards believed silver hairs from virgin librarians, cursed rebellious threads. You don't ask her sourcing. Midnight oil burns low, the hidden sigil, now a lumpen hillock under your palms. Charlemagne once ordered all embroidered dragons burned, but he never met a determined textile conservator. Embers die, the surcoat folds into temporary darkness. Centuries from now, will some grad student x-ray this and scream into their thesis? Let future YouTubers dissect the lump tonight. You sleep. Dawn light claws through the shutters. Your scissors glint beside a new wound in the wool. The bullet hole winks, mocking in its coin-sized innocence. Black silk unfurls, a funeral ribbon eager for duty. Mrs. Pelletier's ledger cracks open. October 1643. One lead ball retrieved from lieutenant's left pectoral post-mortem. Her pen taps the entry. Surgeons used silk sutures since Roman times, but this isn't medicine. It's embroidery as eulogy. You rub the crater's edge, gunpowder granules still wedged between threads. Napoleonic soldiers packed silk into bullet holes to slow bleeding. Makes you wonder who's copying whom. The lieutenant's killer used a Wheelock pistol, rare for its time. Historians still argue whether early rifles caused more panic. Dying without seeing your assailant's face frays the soul. Fetch the thief's candle, you murmur. I need shadow play to track the bullet's path. She vanishes, returns with a stinking tallow stub. Its flame bends toward the whole physics, confessing what wool tries to hide. The silk shivers. Your needle becomes a compass needle, pointing north to grief. Ever heard of morning hairwork? Mrs. Pelletier twirls a gray strand. Victorian widows braided locks into jewelry. But 14th century, Malmu men wore sweethearts' hair in their gambeson linings, sweat-plastered romance. You snort, bet that ended well during summer campaigns. Stitch by stitch, the silk devours the void. Black on crimson becomes a pupil. The surcoat now watches you back. Cross-stitching over the lead residue feels like drawing curtains on a murder scene. The task demands silence, but Mrs. Pelletier's pen scratches rebelliously. Inventory addendum, mended gunshot via Florentine casket stitch, using smuggled Ottoman silk, illegal per Customs Act 1624. You're enjoying this too much. Archaeologists found a Tudor spy's coat with arsenic-laced thread. Maybe our lieutenant pissed off a tailor. Sunlight crests. Your thimble glows molten gold. The repaired hole sinks into the fabric, a well-fed leech. You press your ear to the wool, half expecting a battlefield's echo. All you hear is mites chewing oblivion. Mrs. Pelletier exhales cinnamon and skepticism. You know silk degrades faster than linen. This mend will outlive the surcoat itself. Poetic, if morbid, preservation's just delayed decay with better lighting. Floorboards creak. You glance up, half hoping for the lieutenant's ghost. Only dust performs its slow ballet. 200 years from now, museum interns will x-ray this patch and theorize about covert ops. Let them. The wool keeps its gunpowder kiss better than any diary. Thread snipped, the needle rests. Dawn hardens into day, but the silk pupil still glistens. You drape the surcoat over a chair, its new eye staring at T-H-E Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter in the ceiling plaster. Mrs. Pelletier files her nails with a sewing awl, another anachronism for future scholars to fistfight over. Tinny music floats from her transistor radio, a waltz. You spin the surcoat once, watch its skirt flare. The silk patch winks, coal dust pupil tracking your every move. Some mends aren't repairs, they're ransom notes to history. She flicks off the radio. Come, the cedar chest needs resealing before the wax dies. You fold treason and trauma into rectangular obedience. The bullet holes gaze finally broken. Mrs. Pelletier hums a folk tune about a tailor who outstitched death. Her voice fades as you descend into the spice-scented dark. The surcoat's silence, loudest of all. Cedar resin still gums your nails as you unroll the beekeeper's apron, stiff with age and dried honey. 2 knee-shaped leather patches stare up, larval and brown. The left one curls like a dead leaf. You press it flat, its creases whisper of 1,000 crouches beside hives. Mrs. Pelletier sniffs the air, smells like a candlemaker's suicide in here. Beeswax never dies, just migrates to your sinuses. 14th century beekeepers wore chainmail veils, straight razors ready to evict uninvited queens. their aprons, thick goat hide boiled in salt. You run a thumb over the leather stiff, yet pliant, like cartilage. Hornet. She yelps, then laughs at her own joke. The surcoat's knees sag, threadbare from a lifetime of genuflections. You mark the rot with chalk, outlining continents on woolen skin. Scissors bite into ancient leather, a sound like cracking knuckles. Medieval tanners used honey in their vats, not for preservation. For luck, historians still argue whether honey's stickiness symbolized divine favor or just covered up shoddy stitching. You tack the patches in place, 8 stitches per inch. The leather resists, fighting the needle like untilled soil. Beekeepers hummed to calm their swarms, you mutter. Should I crochet them a lullaby? Mrs. Pelletier tosses a thimble-sized honey jar. Save the theatrics. Victorian curators called this apiarian adhesive. Just beeswax and desperation. Dusk filters through moth-eaten curtains, your workspace, a mosaic of shadows and glue pots. The patches cling now, their edges puckered like old scars. You burnish them with a warmed spoon, leather sighing under the heat. Renaissance duelists lined their breeches with similar hides, sacrificed goats armoring noblemen's egos. Found a caterpillar cocoon in the hem, she announces. Shall we spin our own thread? We're menders, not alchemists. The brushed linen backing whispers against wool, rebellious textures forced into truce. Each tug of thread pulls the centuries closer. Tudor weavers wove horsehair into tapestries for strength, a trick borrowed from stable hands. Your version, coarser, honest. Mrs. Pelletier leans in her breath sweet with stolen comfits. Ever seen a war surplice lined with honeycomb? The Vatican owns 3. Night-turned monks claimed it softened God's wrath or attracted holy termites. You stitch the final seam, the knee now armors itself. Future PhDs will debate the apiary stench, write papers on Beekeepers' Guild symbols. Let them. The truth is simpler. Leather lasts longer than gratitude. She tests the mend with a tug. Survives my wrath, should handle the ghost's kneel. Midnight oil paints the room in jaundiced streaks. You sprinkle thyme over the patches, an old dyer's trick to repel museum beetles. The surcoat stiffens, a soldier at attention. Honeyed leather and gunpowder tang create a scent like regimental guilt. Off to bed, she says, extinguishing the lantern. Before the wax sets your eyelids shut, you linger. Fingertips trace the reinforced knee rough as a beekeeper's palms. Somewhere, a hive hums in its sleep. The surcoat sways on its mannequin, kneecaps ready for wars even historians forgot to name. Outside, fog swallows the garden. You picture tomorrow's archivists, gloved hands puzzling over the sweet rot in a warrior's crouch. Let them blame the bees. The gold braid coils in its tin like a captive sunbeam, 6 inches of tarnished glory. You unwind it slowly, the threads leaving metallic dandruff on your lap. 15th century standards shimmered with such braid, noble houses bankrupting villages for gilded vanity. This scrap, plundered from a rival's banner at Agincourt. Or so the auctioneer swore between coughs. Looks like a drunkard's shoelace, Mrs. Pelletier declares, squinting at the frayed ends. Shoelaces don't cost 3 months' rent. She flicks a loose filament. It spirals to the floor. 30 years ago, curators found similar braid in Joan of Arc's childhood trunk, melted it down for chalices. Sacrilege. Practicality. Gold threads attract relic thieves faster than saints attract heretics. You soak the braid in vinegar, centuries of battlefield sweat rising like sour ghosts. Threads separate reluctantly, each strand a wire curled into submission. Medieval weavers spun gold with squirrel tail hairs for elasticity, a trick lost when furriers unionized. The surcoat's hem gapes, a mouth hungry for closure. Mrs. Pelletier fans herself with an inventory list. Braid the left side first matches the knight's battle stance. Right-handed warriors always favored symmetry. Like their egos, needle pricks cloth, the braid resists, kinking like a spiteful spring. You wrestle it into submission, 1 stitch per muttered curse. Tudor heralds debated whether inverted braids signaled defiance or incompetence. Historians still argue whether the Agincourt standard-bearer dropped his flag in fear or offered it as a deathbed gift. Tensions off, she warns, eyeing the puckered fabric. Looks like the Black Prince's hemorrhoid pillow. Thanks for the visual. Dusk licks the workshop's west wall. You switch to amber-tinted lamps. The braid glows warmer now, hiding its splits under liquid light. 17 overlaps form a serpentine pattern echoing the rival house's motto, bend or break. Revolutionaries later stole the design for Parisian sewer maps. You add an 18th fold because fuck their motto. Mrs. Pelletier uncorks a flask, sherry vapors mingling with vinegar fumes. King Henry V's archers wrapped bowstrings in similar braid, claimed it thwarted French witchcraft. How that work out for them? 2 words, dysentery ditty. Midnight arrives, uninvited and yawning. You suture the final thread, the braid now a scar across the hemline. Wars of the Roses reenactors will later debate its angle, insist the slant indicates secret Yorkist sympathies. Let them. Truth is simpler. You ran out of patience. She drapes the surcoat over her shoulders, strutting like a drunk herald. Behold, the world's most expensive dish rag. Take it off before you sneeze history. Dawn finds you both bleary, pink light erasing the braid's fire. You dab beeswax on the knots, delay the unraveling another century. Mrs. Pelletier scribbles a display tag, ornamentation of ambiguous intent, circa 1415-ish. Don't touch. The surcoat hangs heavier now, its hem weighted with borrowed light. Gold threads wink knowingly. Trophy or tribute? Some questions outlive their askers. You pocket the leftover filament, a souvenir for when museums forget your name. Outside, magpies squabble over a button. You wonder if they'll build a nest worthy of audit. The surcoat sways, its new braid casting foxfire shadows on the wall. 20 generations hence, a grad student will lick the threads, taste vinegar and vanity. Thesis, proposal, oral fixations of late medieval textile conservators. Mrs. Pelletier naps at her desk, cheek smeared with ink. You resist sketching whiskers on her face. Barely. The braid glints, a challenge and an apology woven tight. Let tomorrow's scholars dissect your stitches. Tonight, it's enough that the surcoat stands neither bowed nor broken. Rain taps the roof, a Morse code verdict. You mute it with a blanket. Needles sleep in their cushion. Scissors dream of rebellion. The braid hums softly, a hymn for rivals forced to share a hem. Candle glow turns the surcoat into a battlefield map, each flaw a casualty pinned under waxlight. 7 sword slashes first, jagged as a drunkard's signature. You measure the longest gash with a Donna's patience, 14 centimeters. 15th century menders tagged such rents with soot marks, medieval to-do lists for armorers. Moth bites come next, 23 woolen craters. 6 cluster near the armpit, a banquet for hungry larvae. Folklore claims clothes moths carry dead weavers' grudges. You sprinkle cedar, shavings, ancestral pest control. Bloodstains prove trickier. 11 blooms turned sepia with age, except the collar's rusty Rorschach. Historians still argue whether that splatter crowned a killing strike or sprung from a sneezing fit mid-battle. Your hypothesis: battlefields lack handkerchiefs. The fireplace exhales ash, chasing drafts that make candle flames cower. Needlebook pages stick to your palm, sweat warping the leather. Amateur hour, but the Abbey's midnight choir isn't judging. Ledger entry 1. You stab a pin through slash number 3, its edges frayed like Medusa's split ends. Vatican records mention 57 holy surcoats, but none gnawed by carpet beetles. Pin 2 targets a moth hole crowned with cobweb, arachnid squatter long evicted. Gossamer drifts onto the ledger, translucent graffiti. Bloodstain 4 resists categorization. It straddles a seam-clotted artistry where gore met craftsmanship. 17th century duelists paid extra for bloodstain preservation. Macabre flexes for their portraitists. Footsteps creak upstairs. Mrs. Pelletier's cat. The senile archivist. You freeze, needle hovering like a conductor's baton. Silence resumes. Sword slash 7 hides beneath the new gold braid. You lift the hem, the gash winks, smug. Medieval tax records list. 6 pence per inch for such repairs. Your rate. Higher, monetized ghosts demand inflation. 3 a.m. turns the workshop into a camera obscura, shadows stretching the surcoat into a woolen giant. Bloodstain 8's outline mirrors Hungary's 1456 borders. Coincidence, or some linen dweller's cartographic revenge. Moth hole 14 devours a fleur-de-lis. You feed it patching wool, a dietary intervention. Historians debate whether heraldic moths plagued noble houses, or if that's just pest control propaganda. Candle wax waterfalls over the saucers, edge paraffin puddles, fossilizing your coffee rings. You poke the cooling mounds, miniature Alps for imaginary climbers. Bloodstain 11 demands a haiku. Iron-scented bloom wintering in Saint's woolen skin. Was the sword cold too? Mrs. Pelletier would call this proof of sleep deprivation. Dawn's first bruise purples the east window. You swaddle the surcoat in muslin, its wounds catalogued but unconquered. Ledger's final line sits empty. The quill hesitates, ink drying into a contemptuous period. Floorboards croak behind you, a century-old lament. You turn. Only dust pirouettes in the draught. The last candle drowns in its wax, a final wink before surrender. Darkness licks the surcoat's hem. Somewhere, a moth unfurls its proboscis, mouth open for the next bite. Darkness clings, a woolen weight pressing down, until the workshop door creaks open. Moonlight spills a silver puddle across the floorboards. A cedar box rests on the threshold. No courier, no note. 17th century widows often paid debts posthumously, their wills dictating even thread counts for mourners. Inside the box, pearls, 37 irregular orbs nested in velvet. You roll one across your palm. Its surface holds the moon whole. Medieval apothecaries ground these for heartache tonics, but your ledger needs stitches, not sedatives. The knight's shield arm gapes, wool threadbare from decades of strapping steel. You pierce the first pearl needle, finding the same groove where armor chafed his bicep. Historians still debate whether battlefield mercy stemmed from strategy or sudden conscience. That time, he spared a crossbowman's wife. Her lineage sent these pearls 9 generations later. Candle renewal reveals mismatched hues, baroque whites, pinkish blushes, one black as cannon smoke. Renaissance traders swore black pearls formed in the bellies of shipwrecked sailors, a tale as dubious as it is sticky. Thread shivers, with each bead tension-threatening snap. You switch to silk filament, 3 strands twisted into a river of cream. 16th century seamstresses called this widow's resolve, unbreakable fiber requiring no wax. The 7th pearl crackles when threaded. Laminated nacre cheaper than a widow's mite. 7 more form a knuckles curve, good enough for a museum 10 paces away. Fireplace embers mimic the pearl's glow. 200 years' war widows wore such beads under veils, hidden burdens. You pause, fingertip tracing the surcoat's clavicle seam. Did his shield arm tremble when mercy stayed his blade? Midnight cloaks the workshop again, this time by choice. Each pearl becomes a braille message, 37 apologies from beyond ledgers. The black one anchors the armpit, watchman for sweat and doubt. Dawn arrives as you knot the final thread. The pearls clatter softly, an asymmetrical constellation. Scholars mock funeral beads as sentimental folly, but you've seen moth-eaten shrouds outlast marble tombs. Floorboards sigh their daytime complaints. You close the cedar box, its emptiness now a second relic. The surcoat's left sleeve droops with pearled history. Somewhere, a widow's ghost stops counting coins, her ledger squared at last. Wind bullies the shutters open, a gust licks the pearls. They sway pendulums, keeping time between then and now. You pour yesterday's coffee, bitter and cold, as the first museum guard's boot scuffs the outer stair. Inches from dawn, you drape the surcoat over the gilded chair, empty arms slumping like a deposed king's. Tudor estate inventories list mirrored hall stands, but you've got oak and stubbornness. An eccentric glassmaker's tombstone claims his mirrors held 3 breaths of their owners, a notion curators dismiss while polishing protective gloves. The guard freezes at the threshold, his flashlight beam slicing your shins. Coffee sloshes as you gesture toward the surcoat. Just finishing he's already backing away, keys jingling a hasty retreat. 17th century night watchmen earned extra coin reporting hauntings to gossip sheets. Some things never change. Morning light bounces off the pewter buttons, casting twin silhouettes on the plaster. Crusader armor sometimes flashed sunlight to disorient archers, a tactic lost on this museum's motion sensors. Historians still argue whether armor stands evolved from scarecrows or sawhorses. You adjust the sagging hem. Truth lies somewhere between utility and pageantry. Silence stretches, then the left pauldron creaks downward. You lunge to catch the hem, knuckles brushing phantom calluses. Mannequins never pull this melodrama. Oxford janitors once swore Ashmolean armor shifted overnight floor wax as evidence. You straighten the collar, no poltergeist required. Pearls glint where the shield arm strains, 37 tiny counterweights. Dawn bleeds through moth-punctured velvet drapes. The surcoat's shadow stretches, reaching for a sword belt dissolved in some attic's mildew. Historians still argue whether codpieces protected jewels of the body or ego. The surcoat's lack thereof feels like commentary. Footsteps drum the corridor, 4 pairs, nylon windbreakers swishing. You step behind the armoire, its walnut paneling scratchy against your spine. They cluster at the door, flashlights off now. The surcoat hangs motionless, wool drinking dawn like old wine, temporary humidity warping. A junior intern offers. You hum noncommittally, let them keep their rationalizations. Sunlight hits the repaired sleeve, pearls glowing like miniature moons. Your reflection blurs in the armoire's warped glass, a momentary trio. Did the chair creak? Museums hate when exhibits cough. Dawn's first proper rays hit the saffron bundle, your last-ditch assault on the surcoat's sun-bleached flank. Medieval dyers used urine to fix colors. You've upgraded to citric acid and spite. Crushed petals stain your palms carnelian, a hue crusaders called Saracen's blood, after seeing it on enemy banners. Historians still argue whether vibrant surcoats boosted morale or just hid how often knights pissed themselves. The museum's HVAC system groans like a besieged drawbridge. You press saffron pulp into wool, each rub shouting color back into threadbare fibers. A 1398 dye, merchant's ledger claims 80 petals yield 1 ounce of pigment, enough to bankrupt a village for a scarf. Your thrift store mortar leaks orange rivulets. The security camera's red light winks in sympathy. It's not taxidermy, you mutter to the surcoat's sagging torso. Restorers once stuffed armor with hay. This deserves better. The patch brightens, cinnamon musk, overwhelming the room's usual mildew and regret. Henry VII's laundry lists included saffron for collars, fashion over function, since forever. You scrub harder. Imagine Tudor courtiers side-eyeing each other's stain resistance. Footfalls echo 2 floors down, but climbing. You chuck the mortar behind a tapestry. St. George mid-dragon slaughter, now sticky, with artistic license. The intern from earlier piers in nose crinkling. Smells like my grandma's paella. You glance at the surcoat, its restored panel gleaming like smuggled gold. Leather conditioner, you deadpan. Their retreating sneakers squeak conspiracy theories. Silence resumes. You sponge excess dye, water swirling rust, and sunset. Battlefield textiles often held 3 times their weight in blood, a fact visitors forget, while Instagramming the gore-free displays. The surcoat's armpit stench resurfaces, saffron versus centuries-old sweat. You hum a tavern song, something about maidens and defective cabbage armor. Moonlight replaces fluorescence, janitors mop buckets clanging in the distance. The dye sets stubborn as a mercenary's contract. You relight your cinnamon candle. Its label promised cozy mystery vibes, but now it's all spice and no corpse. 8 hours in, the surcoat's chest gleams like it guarded actual sunshine. A 1920s curator's diary swore chainmail caused stunted orchards. You're starting to believe it. Cool dawn air sneaks through barred windows. You stretch, vertebrae cracking like a relic's joints. Rotten wood flooring creaks where tourists queued to see Napoleon's penis. Exhibits come and go. The surcoat drips above a drainage grate, saffron rivers trickling toward the Thames, forgotten tributaries. You blot the hem, fabric stiffening into parchment optimism. Security's coffee machine gurgles. It's steam your only witness. The restored panel winks under your penlight, no longer a cautionary tale. Museums display tapestries they call naturally aged. You call it sun damage, with delusions of grandeur. Your back pocket buzzes, 3 a.m. Texts from the ceramics guy asking about nightly lingerie. You reply with a photo, saffron fingers flipping him off. First shift arrives, clicking badges and yawns. The surcoat hangs discreetly behind climate-controlled glass, its new brilliance chalked up to innovative lighting. Crowds will only see beauty, not the citrus-reeking all-nighter. As you exit, the gift shop's saffron soap mocks your dye-stained nails. History buffs love sanitized rebellion. Metro cards and gum wrappers litter the gutter, modern crusades. Your boots track orange smears down the escalator. Somewhere above, the surcoat's colors deepen, A general's final shout made fabric. The train doors hiss shut. You lean against graffiti-scarred windows, exhaling cinnamon and vindication. Wind rattles the workshop's hurricane shutters, your train-stiffened fingers coaxing the surcoat's collar into lamplight. 17th century sumptuary laws prohibited commoners from wearing indigo. But this navy thread winks like smuggled twilight. The stitches loop unevenly, a child's defiance of perfect horizontals. You tweeze apart layers, horsehair padding releasing secrets with a sigh. 8-year-old Lady Cecily Talbot once stitched BDF into her sampler, then hanged herself with embroidery silk after a betrothal announcement. Historians still argue whether it stood for betrayal, defies faith, or bastard duke's fiancé. You find no initials here, just a lopsided heart framing words in Middle English. Me Lao has greater strength than, for in winter, the declensions wrong some noble son practicing courtly phrases. Your seam ripper hesitates, destruction tastes bitter when the hands were small. Museum floodlights flicker. Half the building still runs on Edison-era wiring. A 1938 tabloid claimed Rudolf Hess mended his own pajamas in prison. Proof you're not the first to straddle duty and madness. Silk organza billows like a bride's veil, transparent enough to reveal, sturdy enough to protect. You missed it with starch, an aerosol hiss, scattering moths from their ceiling crack commune. Medieval trousseau included keepsake layers, muslins guarding delicate fabrics from sweat and ambition. This shroud deserves better. You iron the organdy until it sticks to your palms. The love note swims beneath its new ceiling, each character warped by the weave. Teenage Edward II supposedly sent locks of hair to Piers Gaveston wrapped in samite, though that account only surfaced after Richard II's deposition. Your needle pierces the organdy, tiny anchors binding, past to present. Phone notifications blare. A podcast titled Queer Needlework Through the Ages blushes, unseen in your pocket. Midnight yawns against the windows. You sip cold Earl Grey, the tannins commemorating some forgotten East India Company atrocity. Conservation demands you tag the find, but the database entry glowers. Pages marginalia, prob. Romantic, circa 1371-400, feels both too much and not enough. A 2007 dissertation argued 3% of medieval textiles contain hidden messages, mostly laundry lists and curse words. 3 AM humidity makes the organdy sag. You reinforce it with hair-thin basting, temporary fixes as eternal as the surcoat itself. Novice stitches often curled left, the work of a right-handed tutor guiding a left-handed pupil. Tutor apprentices paid extra for reversed quillmanship lessons, a fact your calligraphy-obsessed ex never tired of mentioning. Dawn licks the workspace, your lamp's aftermath lingering like a censor's ghost. Historians still debate whether Marjorie Kemp wrote her mystic screeds, or just dictated them between childbirths. The surcoat's collar lies finished, youthful passion fossilized under industrial-grade stabilizer. You snap a photo. The heart's distortion could pass for abstract art. Coffee brews, its acid bite masking the surcoat's eau de crypt. A crawling sensation follows you to the sink, ivory soap erasing navy thread dust from your cuticles. Somewhere above, the hidden words float, untranslated, unprovenanced, undeniable. Your reflection smirks in the kettle's curve, keeper of secrets that'll outlive every hypothesis. The intern arrives, bearing croissants and a PDF about Viking-era darning techniques. They glance at the collar's new sheen. Looks crisper. You nod, letting them assume solvents and discipline. Truth stays buried, like the time your childhood hamster died mid-hibernation, and you told the class it joined a circus. Preservation's just another performance. Conservators never mention this, how quiet rebellion hides in linen sanctums. You file the surcoat's paperwork, checkboxing minor stabilization with bureaucratic nonchalance. The collar's organdy whispers when lifted, frost over a swamp. Visitors will call it patina. You call it mercy. Rain sheets down, washing saffron residue into storm drains. The love note sleeps beneath its semi-transparent tomb. A 10-year-old's heartbeat, given more protection than armor ever offered. Your scissors snick shut, blunt edges sheathed against tomorrow's revelations. Rainwater beads on the workshop's single-pane windows. You rotate the surcoat to catch the weak light. Every mend forms peaks and valleys under your thumb, ridge lines from sword slashes, gentle slopes where sweat wore threads to mist. Heat presses linger on your desk, their steam long faded, but the wool remembers each battle's climate. Medieval women often stitched hidden pleas into garment linings, divorce petitions, birth records, curses against cruel husbands. You trace a puckered gash near the waist, its repair thread shimmering with insect gut. 17th century seamstresses used boiled silkworm intestines for strength, a fact your last Tinder date called useless as a goiter. 3 parallel tiers cross the chest, each darned with different dyed wool. Historians still argue whether such mismatches signaled coded messages or just poor access to materials. You flick a moth carcass off the collar, its wings leaving ghost scales on the navy thread. A 1920s hoarder claimed Napoleon's coat contained map coordinates in its repairs. Turns out his tailor just loved calico scraps. Your thumbnail catches on a raised stitch, proof someone reinforced this elbow 4 times. Wars echo in the layers, Lutzen's frostbite under linen patches, Breitenfeld's gunpowder etched near the hem. The fire crackles its rhythm, syncing with your pulse as you map the damage. 5 pilled patches cluster around the lower back, cavalrymen's saddles chewing through fabric like starved mice. You imagine museum interns decades hence debating these flaws, labeling them ritualistic abrasions or post-battle modifications. A 14th century French knight's will demanded burial in his most hole-riddled shirt to show God he'd earned his rest. Threadbare sections crumble at the edges, time's hunger outpacing your repairs. Your needle dips into indigo wax, a shade so deep it stains the air. 19th century dyers used fermented urine to fix blues, though you'll stick to synthetic mordants. Palm sweat smudges a sleeve's embroidery. The Latin motto now reading Festina Lent instead of Festina Lent. You snort, even hyperliterate warlords botched their stitches after ale. A Swedish conservation journal once published a typo-riddled analysis of Gustavian-era nightshirts. Peer review clearly napping that quarter. Kneading the shoulders releases traces of lanolin, sheep oil seeping through centuries. Calluses catch on iron rings sewn inside the hem, their purpose debated in 3 monographs and a failed true crime podcast. You count them absently 12, 13, 14. But the records only mention 12 campaigns. Wind whistles through a window crack, its pitch matching the surcoat's whistle during the night's final charge. Ink stains bloom near the armpit, field quills leaking through pockets during the 30 years, war's soggiest autumn. Your magnifier reveals a flea fossilized in the dye, a combatant's tiny hitchhiker immortalized. The hearth's embers die as you document the last scar, a moth hole disguised with spider silk thread. Victorian entomologists paid orphans a shilling per 1,000 feet of web, 90% of it wasted in clumsy spools. Your spider silk came ethically sourced, Akka, the garden shed, and applied while slightly drunk. Midnight oil lamps flicker, their smoke writing cursive above the surcoat. You press your palm to the chest's geography, pulse syncing with imagined heartbeats. Some believe textiles absorb their wearer's final moments, a theory you dismissed until now. Conservation gel hardens under your fingernails, its blue tint mirroring the surcoat's shadowed creases. You lean back, wooden chair groaning like a mercenary's arthritic knees. Tomorrow brings X-rays and infrared scans, but tonight the map belongs to ghosts. A truck's distant horn blends with the cooing pigeons outside. Their ancestors probably pooped on this surcoat mid-battle. You snap the toolbox shut, metal clasps ringing like dulled swords. The wool hums under its glassine shroud, a lullaby of scars singing. We endured. Your gloves hit the counter, one finger torn at the tip. Through the hole, the surcoat's terrain looks softer, war's edges blurred by time's fog. Streetlight slants through dust motes, each particle a star in the garment's private cosmos. Keys jingle in the door, the night guard's flashlight bobbing like a will-o'-the-wisp. You turn off the lamp, letting moonlight silver the surcoat's battlefield. History, you decide, is just the gentlest lie we tell the fallen. The needle's next bite will have to wait. Dawn leaks through the workshop's east window. You drape the surcoat over an oaken chair back. Wool settles, shoulder seems hunching like a bowman's drawn arms. Shadows stretch across the floor, threadbare patches glinting where light needles through. Your knees pop as you crouch, eye level, with a lapel chewed by time. 16th century armorers posed empty suits in chapels, their hollow helmets tilted toward altars. You adjust the surcoat's drape, fingertips brushing a moth hole patched with mulberry paper. That Dresden museum claimed Napoleon's empty boots once cured a countess. Migraines, placebo effect, or fabric ghosts. The left sleeve bunches. You smooth it with a bone folder. Steam from your tea curls around the collar, mist mimicking breath in cold air. Historians still argue whether battlefield armor displays honored the dead or just scared off looters. A 1930s treatise proposed surcoats could resonate with a wearer's voice. You half expect the wool to croak water like a desert husk parrot. Sunlight climbs the surcoat's ribs, each mend casting topographic shadows. The right elbow sags, just as the knight's arm drooped after that Saracen arrow in Acre. You prop it with a lead weight wrapped in velvet. Same trick Versailles dressers used for Louis XIV's ceremonial robes. Candle wax dots the collar, remnants of last night's sealing ritual. Your reflection blurs in the window, a translucent double reaching toward the garment. Renaissance tailors swore mirrors revealed a garment's true drape, away from client flattery and candlelit lies. Wind nudges the hem, chainmail rings sewn inside clink like a distant bridle. You count them again, 14 iron circles where records swear 12. Maybe he added extras for anniversaries, or maybe archivists can't count. That Oxford Don's theory about hidden pilgrimage tokens feels quaint now. The truth's probably sweat-stained and boring. Your pinky traces the repaired sword slash, stitches zigzagging like a child's drawing of lightning. Dawn warms the wool's lanolin, releasing a musk of campfires and saddle leather. They never teach you this in conservation school, how textiles hoard smells like grudges. Pigeons clatter on the roof, their claws scratching above the surcoat's upturned hood. You imagine the knight's face there, jaw set, eyes squinted against some vanished sun. A 1911 fashion column advised spinsters to dress chairs in deceased husbands' coats for companionable bulk during tea. You mutter hard pass and flick a woodlouse off the shoulder padding. The surcoat's silhouette shifts, sunlight now carving a waist where none exists. Medieval effigies played this trick. Flat brass knights transformed into 3D warriors by dawn angles. Your chair creaks, mimicking the groan of a watchtower's hinges in the 1346 St. George's siege. Coffee cools as you sketch the surcoat's posture, lines sharper than your sleep-deprived hand can manage. Infrared scans tomorrow map every darned vein and artery of thread, but these stolen minutes, just you and Dawn's verdict, matter more. A bead of tree sap glues the right cuff to the armrest, sweat from the knight's last grip on his reins. You peel it back gently, saving the golden residue for some intern's future thesis. That Montreal grad student's paper on organic battlefield adhesives still circulates as a meme in conservation circles. Shadows shrink. The surcoat's hollow chest now holds a trapezoid of light. You lean close, spotting your breath's fog on the wool. 19th century spiritualists claimed frost patterns on fabric captured soul imprints, charlatanry. Unless dawn's making you gullible, footsteps echo in the hall. The day shifts. First, victim hunting coffee. You step back. The surcoat seems to straighten in response. Museum lighting will sterilize this later turn warrior's skin into a relic under glass. For now, it breathes. Walnut shells crack beneath your pestle, their jagged edges splintering into woody confetti. 8 pounds worth, enough to stain a pauper's shroud black as a cardinal's heart. You line the copper vat with muslin. Medieval dyers called this giving the bath its shift. Then dump the crushed hulls inside. A 1593 treatise advised harvesting nuts after the first frost. Says it makes the dye bite deeper into sin-ridden fibers. Rainwater from the cistern sluices into the pot, the liquid swirling like weak tea. You light the fire beneath it, flames licking the copper's patinied belly. Steam rises, carrying tannins that prickle your nose with memories of bitter wine and quill pens. Some Byzantine nun's diary claimed walnut ink could reveal lies in manuscripts. You wonder if dye works the same. The surcoat waits on its table, patchwork mends stark as scars under noon light. Historians still debate whether pre-industrial dyers understood pH balance or just prayed over their vats. You sprinkle iron sulfate into the brew, the water darkening to bruised plum. One 12th century recipe demanded adder's blood as a mordant, though scholars think they meant beetroot juice. Bubbles rise each pop, releasing a nutty stench. You hoist the surcoat, its weight familiar as a neighbor's baby, and lower it into the bath. Wool drinks greedily, red tones shifting toward umber. Renaissance merchants called this shade Old Knight's blood, marketed it to minor nobles aching for instant gravitas. A moth flits too close. You wave it off with a dyed rag. 17th century London had professional moth charmers, musicians hired to play lutes in attics and distract fabricators. Whether it worked. Ask the moth currently making a break for your sleeve. You push the surcoat deeper with a cedar paddle, its once bright saffron repairs dissolving into the murk. Night falls, the vat exhaling earthy steam. Workers at the 1889 Paris Exposition dunked silks for exactly 7 minutes, but you let time blur. The surcoats earned its slow baptism. Midnight comes the fire reduced to coals. You haul the wool out, dripping like a dredged-up corpse. Shadows hide the transformation. Something clinks in the vat's depths, a thimble, button. Later problem. Dawn finds you wringing the surcoat over a trough, brown rivulets snaking toward the gutter. The fabric's warmer now, a sepia film unifying decades of patches. 19th century charlatans sold antiquing elixirs claiming to age cloth by years per hour. You've done one better, inflicted 80 winters in a single night. Sunlight hits, the surcoat emerges darker than a confession. Jet buttons glare like pupils against the walnut-stained wool. You spread it across lavender stalks, their perfume battling residual earthiness. Tudor stable hands stuffed armor with dried herbs to mask battle stench. Same principle, prettier execution. The collar's embroidery resists the dye. Ghostly vines still visible under the stain. Conservationists in Crete once found a linen tunic dyed with fermented murex, and the recipe died with the dyer. You touch the surcoat's stubborn threads, their secrets safer than any tomb. By noon, the wool stiffens its fibers, remembering how to stand unaided. You fold it along original creases, the way archivists pressed Napoleon's letters. The cedar chest waits, its interior lined with horsehair from 8 generations of grooms' brushes. As you lower the surcoat inside, a shadow pools where the collar meets the chest plate's ghost. Some say textiles retain imprints of their wearer's posture. Maybe that's why the wool settles like shoulders squaring for a final charge. Wind slams the workshop door, a thunderclap of arrival or dismissal. The chest creaks shut, key turning with a granary's groan. 80 winters sealed in cedar. 80 more. You smear walnut grit from your palms, staining the lock bloody. Dye vat cools, its waters still. The cedar chest exhales ancient dust as you lift its lid 8 weeks after sealing the surcoat away. Morning light hits the left shoulder's jagged wound, where iron pauldrons once bit into wool. 16th century armorers used moldy bread to shape metal plates. But you've got no relics to guide your stitching. You prop the surcoat on a dress form, its empty sleeve dangling like a hanged man's arm. Historians still argue whether noblemen removed their pauldrons for comfort, or because battlefield looters pried them off corpses. Your fingers trace the frayed edges, fabric torn where the armor's rivets once anchored. Boar bristles scour the area, prepping fibers to accept new thread. You recall Venetian tailors stuffing doublets with horsehair to mimic muscle tone. Your approach is grittier. Raw wool clumps mound beneath the shoulder, sculpting a false hump where steel should sit. Pine resin thickens the mix. Your makeshift armor paste reeks like a blacksmith's apron. Crusaders' allegedly waterproofed tunics with goat fat and beeswax. But this isn't holy work. You layer the wool, each handful compacted tighter than a grudgemaker's smile. Needle pricks your thumb. A bead of blood stains the false pauldron's crest. Medieval seamstresses believed bodily fluids strengthened repairs, though they preferred menstrual blood for feminine fortitude. You dab the wound, let your contribution be unisex. Linen thread crisscrosses the mound, creating a honeycomb lattice. A 1903 museum curator's diary mentions using spider silk for invisible men's. But you lack both spiders and patience. Sunlight shifts, your creation casts a bear-like shadow on the wall. The hump firms under your palms round as a trencher bread loaf. Pauldrons often bore family crests. This one wears your fingerprint ridges. Instead, you stipple the surface with walnut dye, disguising new wool as weathered oak. Thunder growls, air pressure shifts the surcoat's posture. It lists left, a bloodhound catching a scent. You jab 3 dressmaker's pins into the shoulder, crude acupuncture to adjust its stance. Renaissance quacks swore needle therapy could heal battle injuries. Your version mends ghosts. Night falls, candle flame reveals the repair's true texture. The false pauldron bristles more hedgehog than hero. You rub beeswax over the surface, polishing arrogance into plausibility. 11 layers thick, enough to trick a historian at sword's length. Dew dampens the workshop at dawn. The surcoat's shoulder sags slightly. Emergency measures required. You stitch 2 hidden hooks beneath the hump, anchoring it to the breastplate's ghostly outline. Ottoman armor linked chainmail to fabric this way, except they used gold thread, not butcher's twine. A bluebottle lands on the pauldron, testing its durability. You flick the bug away your creation holds. 17-year cicadas emerge outside. Their drone harmonizes with your thimble's metallic tap. By noon, the wool hardens. A camphor-soaked rag seals the deal. Your hump won't stop arrows, but neither did the original after 1313's Battle of Castle turned armor into colanders. Historians still argue whether that skirmish started over a wheat tax or a duke's adulterous wife. The surcoat stands unaided, now shoulder skewed but stubborn. You pose it near the hearth. Its silhouette suggests a man mid-shrug. Maybe that's fitting. No pauldron ever saved a knight from time's blade, only delayed the cut. Wind whistles through the workshop. It smells of distant rain and closer rot. The cedar chest waits, its gaping mouth ready to swallow the surcoat whole. You hesitate, palms flat against woolen shoulders. For a heartbeat, the fibers warm under your touch, a king's fever in reverse. You fold the surcoat diagonally, hiding the fake pauldron like a lover's hickey. Let tomorrow's scholars puzzle over lumpy tailoring. Their debates will outlive your hands, rustle the workshop's ghostly curtains like moth wings. Key turns in the chest's lock, a sound final as a guillotine's drop. Thunder answers nature's applause or dismissal. You'll take either. The lock's rust flakes cling to your thumb, its protest loud in the chest's stale air. You didn't plan to reopen it, but the violet thread burns in your pocket like a guilty secret. 13th century weavers' guilds marked masterworks. With coded stitches, your rebellion sits softer. Moonlight angles through the workshop's warped shutters. It carves the surcoat's sleeve into a pale canvas. You unspool the thread, dyed with last autumn's withered violets. Napoleon's tailors allegedly stitched love letters into coat linings. This cipher's simpler. The needle glints, a minnow darting toward fabric. You pierce the inner elbow, a spot spared by both armor and moths. Medieval mending guides recommended 7 directional knots for strength. You invent an eighth. Leftover thistledown pads, each loop stuffing the knot with whispers. Some claim Tudor embroiderers used crow feathers to fill royal insignia. But this down comes from your own worn pillow. The violet dims as thread bites fabric, dull as dried blood. A breeze sneaks under the door, lifting the surcoat's arm like a puppet's wave. Your knot vanishes into the weave, visible only if someone knows to pinch the cloth just so. Flag makers during the Crusades hid anti-Islamic symbols in banners, a different kind of threading treason. Your thimble taps the stitch, testing its lie. Historians still argue whether invisible mends were practical craft or medieval superstition. Let them debate. You've salted the truth between woolen waves. Rising, your knees pop like kindling. The chest yawns, its cedar scent now undercut by moth-repelling cloves. You refold the sleeve crinkle-free as a nun's wimple. Tudor nuns darned vestments with gold smuggled in their corsets. Your contraband costs less, means more. Candlelight dies as you shut the lid, plunging the room into owl-hour gloom. 3 floorboards creak their usual protest underfoot. Somewhere upstairs, a mouse gnaws vellum, chewing through someone's forgotten lineage. Dawn finds you scrubbing violet stains from your cuticles. The sink's iron-stained water swirling like watered-down wine. Elizabethan dyers boiled lichen for purple hues. You make do with weed petals and regret. The chest sits silent, its secret hugging a dead man's elbow. You imagine some future fool poking the lump, squinting at thread too common to note. Let them dismiss it as a sleepy mistake, buried beneath flashier scars. Rain whispers against the roof, needles pricking slate. Your workshop becomes a drumskin stretched taut. The surcoats wool would have slurped this weather like wine, thirsty for any baptism beyond blood. You trace the chest's iron hinges, cold as a celibate's ring. No guild would recognize your signature, but you're not stitching for them. Tomorrow's historians can dissect royal banners. Your violet knot speaks a quieter tongue. 4 breezes pass before you step back, work done. The lock clicks, final as a coffin nail. Some truths outlive their tellers. This one will fray quietly, violet fading to gray. Candle smoke curls around your wrists as you layer the 4th mend, a spider silk lattice across the breastplate's shadow. Renaissance tailors thickened noblemen's collars to suggest robust health. Your stitches mimic that deception in reverse. Each monarch left their thread. Henry VII's gold-wrapped linen fraying at the edges. Elizabeth's sea silk smuggled from Aegean coves. James's Presbyterian austerity in undyed hemp. Historians still debate whether Charles I's executioner kept a surcoat thread as a trophy. The wool keeps its counsel. You test the hem's drape. It swings like a pendulum, weighted with dead kings. 4 reins of oak gall ink and candle smoke cling to the fibers. A Tudor-era weaver's manual suggests washing noble garments in beer to preserve red dyes. More practical, than the musk ox urine recommended for Viking tunics. The surcoat resists all baths now. It's become its own ecosystem of sweat and stubbornness. Your thimble dips into a walnut shell full of leaden thread. Victorian tax collectors allegedly sewn these into hems to avoid suspicion. Each loop sinks deeper than the last. 4 layers mean 4 times the secrets. Even the embroidery scissors hesitate at the threads. That hidden violet knot winks when lamplight hits oblique, a peasant's rebellion against royal purples. Parchment fragments from the War of the Roses mention armorers stuffing gambesons with dried ferns for cushioning. You opt for thistledown, softer, though a 14th century Florentine text claims it harbors melancholy spirits. The sleeves hang heavier with each monarch's legacy: Henry's gout, Elizabeth's lead makeup, James's recurring nightmares about silk moths. A mouse skitters across the workshop floor. It pauses beneath the surcoat like a subject paying respects. You flick a peppercorn, its way better tribute than the rat bones found in Charles II's reconstructed doublet. The weight warps the mannequin's shoulders, oak creaking under wool's accumulated history. One more stitch might topple the whole ensemble. Balance matters more than grandeur now. You rub pine resin on the seams, Dutch sailmaker's trick for waterproofing. It hardens into amber droplets, fossilizing repairs made under 3 waxing moons. Jacques the Crow's 1623 tapestry depicts a Mended surcoat walking into battle alone. Historians dismiss it as allegory, but your needle knows better. Midnight coins its usual bargain, 1 finished stitch for an hour of sleep. The final thread glows like a liar's promise. Bavarian armorers once boasted of crafting coats so resplendent they blinded archers. Yours could smother a man with its ghosts. The last knot cinches tight, 4 centuries of mendings now holding up the modern air. By dawn, the surcoat stands unaided, shoulders squared against museum glass, yet to come. Its shadow stretches across the floor, darker and leaner than the cloth deserves. The mannequin slumps like a retired sentry, freed from royal spines. You pocket the silver shears. Their blunted edge still bites skin when kissed. 3 days later, a curator's assistant will remark on the altered drape, murmur about textile degradation. Let them. You've stitched verdicts into every seam, threads outlasting crowns. The surcoat leans into its glass prison, now heavy with kings, lightened by your refusal to let their wars be the final word. Rain taps the window, needles stitching the world whole. The river stone's heat bites deeper than winter, its belly searing, wrinkles from the wool as you press. Steam hisses where rainwater meets scorched granite, a reek of wet hearths and forgotten laundry days. 18th century laundresses boiled rocks in copper kettles for this very chore, though yours came free from the creek behind the old garrison. Historians still argue whether castle stones retained their heat longer, or if that's just tavern talk from drunk textile apprentices. Your shadow dances across the wall, a hunched thing playing at blacksmith with fabric instead of iron. Each pass of the stone leaves a glossy streak, beechwood resin melting into the weave like medieval Elmer's glue. Taproom wisdom claims Charlemagne's cloak was pressed with stones from the Rhine, you doubt. He smelled this much of boiled sheep fat. The surcoat stiffens under your hands, palms reddening, as if the wool itself is blushing at this final intimacy. A blister rises, your badge of honor. Roman legionnaires supposedly sewed woolen undershirts with nettle thread for extra grit. You'll take the burn as tribute. The collar's edge resists flattening. It curls like a dried scroll, fighting to keep its secrets. You cheat with a dribble of mead, honey-sweet steam rising in a miniature Vesuvius over Pompeii red wool. Renaissance dandies used wine to set creases, their vanity your gain. 3 centuries removed. Moonlight bleeds through the workshop window. It outlines every mend in frost-pale judgment. That stubborn pauldron pleat finally surrenders under the stone's weight, its submission outlined in wisps of vapor. Medieval illuminations show saints pressing sacred vestments with holy rocks. Yours is just a hunk of streambed nobodies baptized. The hem's shadow stretches into a dagger, pointing toward the cedar chest where this relic must retire. Your elbow knocks the vinegar jar, its sharp tang mingling with wool musk. Tudor housewives swore by diluted vinegar for stain removal. 2 bad nobody told the night about perspiration rings. The surcoat glows foxfire red under your ministrations. A false vitality before the glass case dims it to museum ash. You hum a carol from the War of Spanish Succession, dubious historicity. But the rhythm keeps the stone moving. When the last crease relents, you slump, lower back screaming like a pike-staffed sentry. 17th century seamstresses called this the ironing hour. Never mind that half died before 30 from boiled linen inhalation. The surcoat lies spent on the table, a lover exhausted by argument. Its every scar now taut and gleaming. Historians will praise the craftsmanship. They'll never trace the thumbprint you left steaming on the right flank. Rain resumes its whisper against the roof, needles pricking at the world's frayed edges. The river stone cools in its dented tray, still faintly humming with the friction of stories sealed. You touch the surcoat's shoulder one last time, warmth lingering like a king's breath on a beggar's palm. Dawn creeps in carrying the scent of sheep fields and inevitability. The chest yawns open, cedar-scented dark, ready to swallow 8 pounds of Mended history. Your fingers brush the clasp. A mouse squeaks in the walls, objecting to the conclusion. Too late, the lid falls with a groan older than your grandmother's knees, locked in with mothballs and regrets. The surcoat begins its long parlor trick of outliving everyone who ever loved it. Through the chest's iron hinges, a whisper escapes, the faintest hiss of steam, or perhaps surrender. Dust motes swim in the cellar's stale air, each fleck a tiny squire carrying memories too light to armor. Your boots sink into grit, that once cushioned wine barrels, French vintages the castle steward hoarded until gout claimed him. Historians agree medieval cellars stayed cool year-round, though nobody mentions the mildew climbing these walls like a drunk conquistador. The cedar chest scrapes stone steps, its iron corners shrieking a protest older than your molars. You set it where sunlight slants through a chink in the mortar, a lazy sundial tracking decay. 8th grade field trips taught you oak beams warp faster than cedar. Right now, both seem equally doomed. The Surcoat's resin smells sharper here, ghost of a pine forest buried under castle foundations. Mothballs roll like discarded cannon shot as you arrange the chest. 16th century apothecaries swore by mercury for moth prevention. A brilliant plan if you enjoy dying at 40 with shiny woolens. Your thumbnail catches on the lock cold iron teeth, reminding you of the blacksmith's daughter and her unfinished ballads. Tinder dry lavender spills from a sachet, its perfume smothered by 80 years of cellar breath. You picture the night's final exit, horse hooves clattering over these same flagstones. The castle fell to cannon fire in the year of our Lord, 1500-something. History's less fun when you're dusting its corpse. A spider claims the chest's northeast corner, spinning silk finer than anything in your needle case. Renaissance genealogists would call it a portent. You call it a roommate who pays no rent. Your candle gutters, tallow smoke drawing squiggles on the ceiling like a drunk monk's manuscript. Tudor accountants logged every ale cask here. Not a single scroll mentions the despair leaking from these stones. One wax droplet lands on the chest, a perfect blister mirroring the one on your thumb. Folk tales say abandoned cellars grow their own, whether judging by the chill in your knuckles, they're halfway to winter. Footsteps echo above tourists gawking at the reconstructed Great Hall. Their guide lies about tapestries. You've seen the originals, moth-eaten and stashed in a Belgian warehouse. A crumb of mortar plinks into your hair, the castle shedding skin again. You press a palm to the wall, still warm from some forgotten kitchen fire. Historians still argue whether nobles stored valuables here for preservation, or just to hide loot from ex-wives. Shadows lengthen into pikes as you retreat, each step erasing your presence. The chest becomes a blurry altar, its edges dissolving like battle plans in the rain. Your last glimpse catches a moth alighting on the latch, white wings folded like surrender flags. Cellar air clings to your lungs, sour kinship with the Surcoat cedar shroud. Above ground light feels vulgar, now a streetiop after the cellar's bruised silence. You kick the door shut with a heel oak protesting in a language older than crusades. Sunset paints the courtyard the color of dried blood, or maybe cheap Merlot. That night, rain soaks the ruins. Each dribble down the cellar steps whispering, "Wait, wait, wait." The scissors hang suspended. A steel stork poised above its metallic nest. Morning light slants through a cracked cellar window. It's been 80 winters, but dawn still favors east-facing ruins. Your knuckles brush wool worn thinner than a tax collector's patience. 14th century tailors favored curved blades for trimming, though yours came from a Leeds factory floor via eBay's mercies. A thread protrudes near the collar, stubborn as the story it whispers. You pinch it between oiled blades borrowed from an embroidery hoop. Snip. The strand drifts down one of Cortez's lost ships, sinking into cellar gloom. Medieval laundresses swore snipped threads attracted house spirits, better to burn them. You let yours fall, let the ghosts fight over scraps. 3 more threads, each a farewell. The left sleeve surrenders a wiry sentinel guarding an armpit stain. Renaissance dyers used stale urine to set reds, a fact that explains many historical odors. Your cut severs the memory. The blade gleams, so sharp it could split a raindrop. Historians still argue whether ceremonial shears existed, or if every tool became sacred when death lingered nearby. A moth-eaten hem offers the final challenge, threads snarled like treaty negotiations. You work by touch, the cellar's gloom ripe for mistakes. 8th grade home ec floods back Mr. Hargrove droning about bias cuts while you doodled dragons in margins. The scissors sigh, taking 7 snips to silence the fray. Candlelight reveals your reflection in the blade, distorted nose. Crow's feet deepened by years, squinting at moth trails. You could frame this moment, call it self-portrait, with existential shears. The joke curdles, humor tastes odd in crypt-quiet air. Parchment tags flutter as you bundle the clipped threads, each labeled with indecipherable notes. Future archaeologists will debate whether signifies uncertainty or medieval shorthand. A chill climbs your spine, maybe drafts, maybe the night's ghost reviewing your work. His surcoat lies restored, collapsed like a slain dragon. Dust motes swirl tiny dervishes, celebrating your last stitch. You fold the garment, elbows tucked, blood-rusted patches inward. Tudor nuns taught this method for preserving saints' robes. God's gaze prefers neat corners. The cedar chest creaks, its hinges groaning into final closure. Footsteps clatter overhead, another tour group praising authentic plastic goblets. Your thumb finds the violet knot in the sleeve, your mark already fading beside centuries of scars. One deep breath, cellar mold and lavender battling for dominance. Then you walk away. Sunlight assaults the stairwell, its glare erasing cellar shadows. You pocket the scissors, steel warming against your thigh. The keep's skeleton looms, broken teeth, against a cloudless sky. Somewhere inside, a moth twitches caught in a spider's web. Threads snap. Wars end. The cellar door sighs shut behind you, its groan swallowed by sunlight, thick as honey. You tilt your face upward, warmth pooling in the hollows, where midnight's chill once nested. A breeze combs through the courtyard, lifting dust from your sleeves like ashes from an extinguished pyre. Your pocket holds the scissors, now softer than a spent coin. They hum with the memory of snipped threads, a lullaby in tempered steel. Behind stone walls, the cedar chest keeps its vigil folds of wool dreaming of tourneys long devoured by worms. Fingers uncurl, palm upturned to catch dandelion fluff adrift from the keep's fractured battlements. Somewhere, a spider spins silk where moth wings once trembled. You count breaths, 12, 13, until the knot in your sleeve stops itching. A child's laughter skips across the courtyard, tourists exiting through the gift shop, clutching replica swords, their voices fray at the edges, muffled by ivy swallowing the guardhouse. You follow the path where shadows bleed into meadow, each step lighter than the last blade of grass. The scissors grow still in your pocket, no more threads to chase, no specters bargaining for remnants. When the drizzle begins, you barely feel it rain stitching the sky to earth with silver thread. Eyes close. The wind carries the scent of turned soil and old cedar. Somewhere, a moth escapes its web,